friends, I am the Anti-Terrorist. Thank you for all of your emails and your messages of support, and for staying part of the conversation. After having received an inordinate amount of messages following my dealing with the police broadcast, I'm acutely aware that that subject needs to be expanded upon. Now, I'd like to make it perfectly clear. I'm not broadcasting on this subject to help the career scumbags out there who take great pleasure in causing harm, injury, or loss. I'm recording this for the honest people out there who realize that they're being caught up in an ever-tightening totalitarian net and who wish to understand a little more about what their rights are, before, during, and after arrest, at border patrols in the United States, for instance, and in the airports, and the like. I'm also not broadcasting for the sheeple, who you often hear bleating,
"Well, if you've nothing to hide, then you shouldn't object to a search of your stuff."
I'm broadcasting for those of you who object to warrantless searches of your private property. I'm broadcasting for those of you who are courageous enough to stand up for your rights, and those of you who give a damn about privacy. I'm one of those people. I care about privacy. I have lots to hide, and I have lots that I don't want you to see, and that is my right. It's why I wear clothes. Otherwise, if I had nothing to hide, I'd walk around the street naked, would I not? I also want to make it perfectly clear once more that I'm not against the police, as long as they behave as sworn peace officers, and that they operate under the oath they swore when they joined the police service. A good policeman is a peace officer, and not a law enforcement officer. He's not a zealous social reformer out to save you from yourself. A good policeman doesn't vigorously enforce unreasonable statutes. He doesn't write a ton of needless speeding tickets. His attitude is properly libertarian, and he doesn't bother those who live peaceably. He knows that his authority derives from the people, and he's mindful to be a good steward of that authority. He'll never try to trick you into flimsy consensual searches, or bully you into waiving your rights or offering information about yourself. A good policeman should be actively supported. Now, if you're not fully aware of the corporate nature of these entities, please go back and review my broadcasts on corporate revenue collection and corporate control. And so, with pseudo-martial law seemingly just around the corner, we still have some time to exercise our rights. So let's take a look at those. There are two golden rules when dealing with the police, especially if you feel like you're being unfairly dealt with. You may wish to revisit my dealing with the police broadcast to get a sense of number one, but I will remind you of it. Number one actually has three parts, 1A, B, and C. 1A is shut up. 1B is keep your mouth shut. Fish are only caught because they open their mouths. Keep yours shut. And 1C is, if you keep your lips pressed together, the silly words won't fall out. Rule number 2 is never consent. Never consent. Ever. Do not consent, especially if you feel you're being unfairly dealt with. Never consent. Period. Remember, they need your consent. They need you to understand. And so invariably, the officer will say, "Do you understand what I'm saying to you?" And your job is to say, "Am I obliged to understand? Am I obliged to seize, grasp, or comprehend what you just said to me?" Never making statements, always asking questions, because the master asks the questions and the servant answers them. If you stand there declaring that these officers work for a corporation and you declare that you're free, then the onus is upon you to prove that. Whereas if you ask the question, "Am I obliged to stand under what you just said? Am I obliged to stand under, to understand, to seize, grasp, or comprehend what you just said?" the onus of proof is upon them. They have to prove that you are obliged to understand, that you are obliged to consent. Do not make statements. Ask questions. Don't stand there foaming at the mouth, demanding that you be free. You are free. You're as free as you think you are. And all the while you're shouting and wailing and gnashing your teeth, you're just proving that you need to be taken care of. You're just proving that you're a belligerent slave, that you're an angry little slave, and you're upset about the slavery that you're suffering under. Start behaving like the master and you'll be treated like one. Ask the right questions. Get them to prove that they have some authority over you. And if you're getting those questions on the record, You could put that officer in a very difficult position if you were to instigate a lien based on his dishonor afterwards, for instance. Show them a little love. Couldn't hurt. In fact, there are a couple of gentlemen on YouTube that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. Charlie and Danny from the C. Veitch channel are a prime example of how to deal with the police with compassion and understanding and with a clear head and always asking the right questions. You can see the police getting quite embarrassed in some instances because they realize that their authority is perhaps being stretched a tad, and they either toe the line or they start behaving like very naughty boys and kidnapping people. His channel, the C. Veitch channel, is certainly one that I would look at if you want to see how to deal with the police in a very compassionate, caring, we're all equal kind of way. So there are three kinds of scenarios between you and the police. There's the contact, encounter, there's the stop or detention, and then there's the arrest or putting you in custody. And the object of this exercise is to teach you how to recognize the progression of lawful restraint and how to nip it in the bud, if you like, before it even gets started. The contact is when any police officer walks up to you and begins a consensual conversation. A consensual conversation.
Nice day, isn't it? Yes, lovely day, lovely day. What are you up to today? Anything special? Just shopping, are you? Excellent, excellent. Yes, just a bit of flat footing, you know how it goes. Just walking around, making sure you're safe. You feeling safe? Job done. Excellent. Well, have a nice day. Have a nice day.
And although this might seem innocent enough, you should always remember that police are never off duty. And they're never off duty because criminals are never off duty. Don't believe he's just being friendly. It's just a fishing expedition. Police officers chat up the public like men chat up women. There's an agenda going on here. That's not to say that there aren't any friendly police officers out there who just like a good chat to pass the time. But you should be aware, he's always on duty, he works for the state, and the state needs revenue. If the police officer is approaching you, he's doing it in his capacity as a caretaker. He's just there to make sure that everything's all right, in the same way that a waitress would come up to you while you're having a meal and asking you if the food is all right. He's just being a caretaker. However, you're not obliged to speak to the poor chap, even if he is just trying to be a friendly soul. Well, thank you for doing your job. I appreciate it, officer. I have to be somewhere else, though. Goodbye. During that first contact, you have the utter right to ignore him and walk away. You're not required to tell him your name, and you're certainly not required to provide ID. Simple as that. The police officer's powers during a contact are nearly zero. If you disengage, there's nothing you can do without the required reasonable articulable suspicion for detention or probable cause for the arrest. He can walk along with you in public for as long as he likes and observe you, though. He can also ask you to take your hands out of your pockets because you could be hiding something that could injure him. So when you're approached by an officer in the first instance, make sure your hands are out of your pockets so that he doesn't have to ask you to remove them. Don't put yourself in a position where you have to follow orders. He has the right to feel safe and be safe. He does have the power during any kind of confrontation with you to frisk you for weapons if he has reasonable belief that you're armed or that you pose a threat to him and the public. Officers who have lost or misplaced their moral fiber somewhere along the way have been known to abuse that particular right, and they will feign feeling unsafe in order to get you to reveal something about yourself or in order to search you. So just watch out for that one. Police officers don't start a conversation unless they're suspicious of something. The policeman's job in this instance is to uncover some sort of probable cause. The police officer needs probable cause in order to detain you. Until he's established probable cause, though, you have every right to walk away. If you feel like you're being manipulated or bullied, show the relevant righteous indignation. Don't just be polite, just tell him, are you operating under the presumption that I am a criminal? Because if you are, I take offense at that, officer. Now, unless you have reasonable articulable suspicion, I am leaving. And so on to the detention. Now, if you are lawfully detained, it's probably because you made yourself conspicuous and stupidly attracted attention to yourself. Now, a detention is not an arrest. It's what they like to call a reasonable suspension of your freedom until the officer can uncover the required probable cause for an arrest. A detention must be based on reasonable articulable suspicion that you are or were involved in some criminal activity. The officer has to prove that it's more than just a hunch to be able to detain you. If the officer can prove concealment, or if you've run away at the sight of officers, unusual or suspicious movements, if you run away from property that you're holding, or if you're walking around looking suspicious or you're wearing some sort of disguise, or if you're present at the scene of a crime, for instance.
No, sir. No, sir, there's nothing to worry about, really, and the bomb threat is over now. We're just here in the tube, dealing with random people, making sure that everything is tickety-boo. All we want to do is take a quick look in your bag, and you can be on your way. I can see you're in a rush, but I promise you it's only going to take 2 minutes. And besides, if you've got nothing to hide, then why be concerned? Quick 2 minutes, and we can let you go on your way.
So if you remember from the original dealing with the police broadcast, you are never obliged to answer any police officer's questions, either when being detained or being arrested or otherwise. Nor are you obliged to let anyone look in your bag. They will do it anyway. They'll do it unlawfully and without your consent, and that you will have to learn how to deal with after the fact. Now, you cannot be moved from one place to another during a detention, though you're not free to walk away until he says so. Being unnecessarily placed in custody constitutes an unlawful arrest without probable cause. You're also not obliged to show any ID, your driver's license, passport, or otherwise, during a detention. A detention can last up to 30 or 40 minutes, depending on the discretion of the officer, and it's during those 30 or 40 minutes that you need to keep your wits about you because he needs to uncover probable cause, and he'll do that by talking to you, appearing to be friendly, and so on and so forth. And your job during those 30 or 40 minutes is to strictly adhere to rule number 1 and rule number 2, without exception. Now, if probable cause doesn't exist, then you're free to go after a few minutes, unless he magically makes up some probable cause, which has been known to happen. You have every right to demand that he expresses his reasonable articulable suspicion to you for the detention, and you should do that. Again, am I free to go? What is the nature of this detention? Am I free to go? If the police officer won't tell you what his reasonable suspicion is, then you should say, since you've not expressed any legal basis for this detention, I must be free to go. Am I free to go? And then attempt to leave. You have to call his bluff or force him to detain you, lawfully or unlawfully. If the officer tries to concoct some sort of probable cause by suggesting things like, I can smell marijuana, can you? Can you smell hash? What I might do then is get a couple of witnesses, get them to come and smell it. Can you smell hash, sir? Get them to concur that there is no smell of marijuana in the area to diffuse the officer's chance of obtaining some sort of probable cause. The same applies for the roadblock detentions that you're seeing in the United States at the moment. It has been known for an officer to have a little bit of hash in his pocket, touch the side of your car with it, and then get the sniffer dog to bark when he smells the hash on your car door, therefore giving them probable cause to search your vehicle. Make sure that no one touches your car. Make it very clear that you do not give consent for them to touch your vehicle in any way, shape, or form. The best example of dealing with the roadblock detentions in the United States at the moment is a YouTube channel called Checkpoint USA. The owner of that channel has filmed all of his experiences in these matters, and they're well worth a watch. And you can get a sense of how someone actually knows how to assert their rights and ends up driving off, leaving the officers very frustrated indeed, I can imagine. Keep a level head at all times. Don't get angry. Don't start foaming at the mouth. But don't be overly confident or cocky either. You don't want to do anything or say anything to exacerbate the situation or to antagonize the officer. Your job is to get away, but to be polite but firm and assert your rights. And then we come to the arrest. So you've either been belligerent or you've cheesed off the officer in some way. You're not a criminal. You've just been asking questions and so on and so forth. You've irritated the officer and he's about to arrest you. Now, whenever an officer significantly restrains you, that's an arrest, even if he doesn't actually mean to arrest you. If he puts his hands on you and uses any sort of force, that's an arrest. And any significant restraint must always be supported by probable cause. Without probable cause, the officer is liable for a false arrest, and any evidence gathered after that fact is inadmissible in court. Probable cause generally comes from evidence seen in plain view. That means he's either seen it, or heard it, smelt it, touched it, or tasted it for himself. If his five senses alert him to a crime, then he has probable cause. But the officer must personally know the factual situation going on. If he doesn't, then it's hearsay, and it's not probable cause. Now, although it seems only fair that you should lawfully be able to resist an unlawful arrest, it's not advisable. It's exactly what the officer would need to justify the arrest if he hasn't got probable cause. If you start wrestling with him, he's going to be able to charge you with resisting arrest, and he'll have it in the bag, and his job is done. Just go along peacefully, and do not fight or struggle in any way, shape, or form. Just shut up. That's your most powerful weapon. Anyhow, you're about to be placed under arrest. At that point, I would have my mantra to hand. Officer, for and on the record, there will be no need for force or violence. I will not resist arrest. But you are obliged to note that I will be operating under protest and duress every step of the way. I reserve all of my rights at all times, and waive none of my rights at any time for any cause or reason. I do not consent to this arrest, and I do not consent to the taking of my fingerprints, DNA samples, and I do not consent to be placed on any database. Once you're checked into the police station, reaffirm your mantra, assert your rights, and then shut up. Sign absolutely nothing except for an inventory of whatever they take off you. If I'm told to sign something, what I might consider doing is asking them what will happen if I don't sign. And invariably they'll threaten you with more cell time, or perhaps more court time, or some sort of charge. That will give you the right to proceed your signature with, under protest and duress, threat and coercion. More cell time is a threat, is it not? Now, once you're arrested, they can pretty much do what they want with your belongings. But if they want to do a major bodily intrusion, like a cavity search, they're going to need a warrant for that, and you make sure they get one. Now, once you're in the cell, you'll almost certainly be called for an interview, and their job is to get you to talk. They'll try and gain some sort of rapport with you, chit-chatting about this and that, and seemingly unrelated to the charges that you're facing. Remember, he's not your friend. If he was your friend, he would have let you go. They'll try and wear you down by asking you the same questions again and again to force you, first to talk, and then to make mistakes and inconsistencies. Remain politely silent. Having said that, if you do feel strongly there's been an injustice, you should show the relevant righteous indignation and answer their questions with questions. You should be aware of some of the little tricks they use in order to get you to talk.
Hey, nothing to worry about there. I just needed to answer a few routine questions.
Where they're concerned, the questions are never unimportant, and they're never innocuous.
Hey, come on, mate. I'm just trying to help you.
Absolute nonsense. If he wants to help you, ask him to let you go.
It's truth, mate. I just want to give you a chance to tell your side of the story.
Well, I think you should tell me your side of the story. What is it you think you know?
What are you trying to hide?
Oh, what are you trying to make me say?
Innocent people don't mind answering questions.
Well, I'm pretty confident that if you thought I was innocent, you wouldn't be asking me questions in the first place, would you?
You'll feel better if you talk to me.
Oh, don't worry about that. My conscience is perfectly clear.
Well, there's a bloke outside who's just identified you.
Really? Oh, bugger. Oh, well, see you in court then.
Listen, son. Your mate's already told us everything.
Well, if that's true, you don't need my story, do you?
Now you listen to me, sonny boy. This is your last chance for a deal, so you better start singing.
Typical intimidation tactic. Creating a false sense of urgency. And then, of course, we have that old chestnut. The tried and tested good cop, bad cop routine. Now you listen here, Sonny. If you don't start answering my questions, I'm going to ram your teeth so far down your throat, you're going to need to stick a toothbrush up your bum to clean them. Grr.
Oh, don't listen to him. No, he's an angry bugger. Yeah. No, listen. I'll calm him down a bit. I'll calm him down. Now you just relax and tell me all about it, and I'll make sure he doesn't come back in here again, all right? Look, sir, I'm just doing my job.
Yes, well, that excuse didn't fly at the Nuremberg trials. What makes you think it's going to fly now? They will almost certainly suggest something like,
Well, if I were you, Sonny, I'd be thinking about getting some legal advice right now. Would you like us to call you a solicitor or a lawyer?
well, I've done nothing wrong. I'm not a criminal. Why on earth would I need legal advice? If you get a solicitor or a barrister or a bar-licensed attorney involved in your case, You're basically admitting that there's something you need to defend. And besides, solicitors, barristers, and bar-licensed attorneys generally deal with persons. Are you a person? You could go that way if you wanted to. But keep in mind that with enough time and pressure, anyone will crack. So silence is always the best route. Because once you start answering their questions, the rest gets easier and easier for them. So you need to really just look at yourself and ask yourself how vulnerable you are to intimidation. You have to examine your personality and honestly appraise yourself. Can you stand silence with others? Would you feel the need to break the silence and say something during conversation? Do you listen carefully when someone's speaking to you? Or do you just wait for him to finish so that you can talk? Do you crave attention? Or do you prefer to be ignored? Are you suggestible? If someone says, "Look at that," do you immediately turn your head? Do you have a tendency to snap out answers to questions? Do you often feel the need to explain or justify yourself? Are you the nervous type? Do you show it by gestures and movements of your hands or body language? How good is your resistance to discomfort? Anyhow, whatever route you decide to take in this questioning process, always maintain eye contact. Don't let your eyes move in a different way when you're being grilled and when you're not. Don't give them any indication that you're nervous, afraid, and as I said earlier, don't show them any aggression, and certainly don't get emotional. Just keep a cool head. Eventually, if you give them nothing, they have to let you go. They can only hold you for a certain amount of time, whether it's 24 hours, 48 hours, or whatever it might be. Just hunker down and deal with it. They will separate you from your family. They will separate you from anyone who can give you any advice. You just have to sit it out and wait to see what happens. Now, if they have realized they've made a mistake and they've unlawfully arrested you, they may try a few little tricks to get something on you while you're in the cell so that they can justify the arrest and avoid some sort of legal action. They might try to set you up in some way, plant something on you, or get you to handle something that you had not previously touched, getting your fingerprints on it. I know these are dirty tricks, but they have been known to happen. Ultimately, when you leave, they will ask you to sign to get your items back that they took from you in the first place. But again, sign nothing else. If you do, as I said earlier, under protest and duress, threat and coercion, sign your name, by signature agent, and underneath that, write all rights reserved without prejudice. That basically negates any effective money-making activities they can instigate using any paperwork you sign. Now, if you're driving your car and you find you're being followed by a police officer, don't make any furtive or sudden moves. Police love to follow what looks like an erratic driver and try to rattle him. So stay cool and collected. Don't start rearranging your car's interior. That should have been done before you set out. You'd be best to make sure that police stay in front of you and not behind you. When it comes to being pulled over and detained while driving, there are certain conditions that you are subject to with regards to the driver's contract. For instance, you are obliged to hand over your car registration papers and your insurance details and your driver's license. That is part of the contract and you agree to it when you apply for a driver's license. So if you are pulled over, if it were me on the stop, I would get out of the vehicle, close the windows, and shut the door and lock the car and stand outside your car whilst chatting to the officer. Again, the same as a normal detention. Don't put yourself in a position where you have to follow orders. He will invariably ask you,
Good afternoon, sir. License and registration, please.
in which case you hand over those documents. After that, you're not obliged to do a single thing.
Would you mind if I just had a quick look around your car, sir?
Am I obliged to let you search my vehicle, officer? If not, I'm not consenting to any searches today. Thank you very much. You do not engage in polite conversation. Just hand the papers over and let him do what he has to do. He will go and do a license check on your driver's license, and he will check your insurance details, no doubt. If you've got an infraction on your record, you have to deal with that afterwards. And I would go to thinkfreeforums.org or similar sites to figure out how you're going to deal with that particular court appearance. But essentially, as I've said, you've signed up for the contract. You are obliged to hand over those documents if you are driving a registered vehicle and you have a driver's license. Personally, I would do a little studying on what a driver's license actually is. Once he's given you back your paperwork, effectively you're free to go, unless he's found some sort of reasonable articulable suspicion to detain you further. If he seems to be keeping you longer than usual, be on your guard. And as in my original dealing with the police broadcast, during any conversation with any police officer, pull out your phone and record the conversation. If the police officer tells you to turn it off, I would say, "Your objection is noted, officer. Thank you. I reserve the right to record this conversation for my records. If there is a law that prohibits me from doing so, please state it now." And when it comes to airports, the airport is one of the most vulnerable places you can go to. It's the epitome of a controlled environment. And you've voluntarily entered into the airport, and so you've given implied consent to anything that goes on in there. Nobody in there cares about your privacy or your rights. You're defenseless. You have a flight to catch, and time is against you, and they know it. And they will play with that if they decide to stop you. After 9/11, air travel is no longer the same deal. And so when it comes to going through a security check, personally, I would do everything I could to make sure I ninjaed through there without any hassle whatsoever. Make sure you take your belt off. Don't give them any reason to search you. Make sure all your coins are out of your pocket. I know it seems like common sense, but ultimately, I just like to keep their hands off me as much as I can. Just do everything you can to whisper through there like a ghost. Make sure you don't bring attention to yourself unnecessarily. Also, when you're traveling internationally, you will invariably have to fill out a landing card, like this one. And what I like to do is to take two of them and fill them both in exactly the same way. And what you'll find is that every now and then a customs agent will give you a suspicious look, and he'll scribble something cryptic on your card, like a little signature or a little A or a B or something like that. He'll be alerting a desk agent to give your stuff a thorough search. So what I tend to do is I pocket the card that he's made a mark on and bring out the one that is unmarked, and present that further down the line if necessary. Now, of course, I'm just scratching the surface on this topic. There is much more to learn. Now, bearing in mind that YouTube is an international entity, the terminology I'm using to describe the progression of lawful restraint may differ in the United States, and it may differ in Canada and France and whatnot, but the process is still the same. There is the contact, there is the detention, and then finally the arrest. So try not to get hung up on the words that I'm using. They're merely words used to describe the process. Go to thinkfreeforums.org, thinkfree.ca, worldfreemansociety.org, and read up on what other people's experiences are in terms of court and dealing with the police and border patrols and so on and so forth. As you may or may not know, I have been tied up over the last few months with a writing project, but that has been handed over to my scary publisher, and it will be available shortly. Details are available on the Anti-Terrorist website, a link to which you'll find below in the information box. Again, I would like to offer a personal thank you to Mary Elizabeth Croft and Robert Arthur Menard for making an enormous contribution to my knowledge base and to essentially waking me up. I cannot tell you how grateful I am for that opportunity, and I would encourage everyone to watch everything that Mary Elizabeth Croft writes and puts out, and everything that Robert Arthur Menard records and puts out for your entertainment and education. You'll find Robert on YouTube under Mr. Mighty, that's MrMitee, and you will find Mary's blog on spiritualeconomicsnow.net. I often get emails asking me, does this information work in Afghanistan, or does this information work in Belgium? I have no idea. You have to research it for yourself. But ultimately, unless you're living under a dictatorship, you have certain rights. And it's just really a matter of deciding whether you're free or not, and then acting on that decision. Do the study and empower yourself. Thanks for listening.